see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Dave McColgin. Thanks, Dave, for joining me for this talk.
Thanks for having me.
And the way I got connected with you is your work for a product design company called Artifact Group. And you wrote an article called Why You Should Invest in Empathy. And you also wrote, a report or a white paper titled Empathy, Design Tool, and Outcome. So I wanted to hear kind of about your report, about your work, and kind of what got you interested in this topic. Perhaps we could start with.
What got me interested was we started an internal company initiative called 21st Century Design, and we had an employee leading that effort and talking at conferences and trying to establish what that would mean. And we've turned it into basically outcome-centric design work. So it's not just the product itself; it's all the impacts that it has on people that use it, and being aware of that and using it for ends that we think are preferable outcomes, better than when we started before the product. And I did an audit of all the internal project work that we had done. So at Artifact, if there's some downtime, you get a passion project potentially, or the ability to partner with somebody in industry. We have sponsored time to do what we'd like. And I looked at all the projects we've done over the past, I think we're a 6-year-old company, and looked for patterns. And one of the ones that popped up was empathy. And then when we were working on 21st Century Design, it seemed like one of the first preferable outcomes that we could address, because it's not just an outcome in the world, it's also a tool for us as designers.
Yeah, I'm just showing your website, the Artifact Group website. And so product design is kind of the one company I'm familiar with is IDEO. So is it along those lines where a company comes to you and says, well, we need this product, and can you design it? And you kind of go through a design process to kind of hear what it is that the company wants, what the consumers, the users of the potential product will be interested in, and kind of do this whole design process. Is that kind of what Artifact does?
Yeah, exactly right. And people will come to us at varying stages of readiness. So sometimes it'll be they already have a product or they have an idea for something. And sometimes they'll be trying to figure out what to do next. And we'll start at a really basic level to investigate what their options are. But our usual process starts with research and getting out and talking with people in their environments and trying to understand what's working well for them today and what might work better in the future.
Well, I was really interested in this whole process because I've been looking at the design school at Stanford, and their design process is they have a specific component that says empathy. It's one of the stages where you go out and you listen to people and you really see kind of where they're coming from. So this whole area is very of real interest to me that I want to kind of dig in more. So I really grateful for you taking the time to talk me through this and hear more about how this process works.
Yeah.
So let's see. Perhaps we could go through your article. How would that be? Just kind of go step by step. You wrote an article about, like I said, why you should invest in empathy, and then the actual, what you call it, a white paper, or what is that product you have, that the empathy design tool and outcome?
I don't know what the tool and outcome is, but the case for empathy was, a white paper that we published on our website to start conversations with people, and we're going to be using it as the basis for a workshop at an upcoming conference, and we talk to clients about it, use it in our own internal processes too.
Okay, shall we just walk through that? It starts off here. it says the case for empathy. If there is any one secret to success, it lies in our ability to get the other person's point of view and to see things from his angle as well as your own. Starts off with that quote.
Yeah, there's 3 quotations that I found. I was originally writing this for our internal audience, so it was for all of our project leads and our leadership to read, making the case for why it should be one of these 21st century design outcomes we pursue. And so in looking for quotations, I found one from the business perspective, which is the one you read, one from a societal perspective, and one for a sort of higher life purpose perspective, which was the third one. So Henry Ford, Barack Obama, and Albert Einstein were the
Oh, okay. Yeah, great lineup there.
That's not bad. But I thought it kind of illustrates how there's multiple reasons for it to be something that we're striving for as a company. That there's certainly a business reason to do this, and I know on your site you reference a lot of books that make that case. I had read Wired to Care in part of the research as well, and there are strong reasons why it makes business sense, but there's societal reasons why it increased empathy can help us deal with the larger scope of problems that go beyond just traditional in-groups and out-groups, these kind of smaller tribal relationships where empathy evolved originally. So if we're making bigger problems, there's a societal reason to have bigger sense of empathy. And then Einstein was just sort of, what would you call that? I suppose a purpose of life in his assessment.
So you're kind of feeling that empathy is almost like a basic, just human value, kind of for purpose, life's purpose. Then
I think you could see it that way, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But illustrating the multiple facets was important to kick it off. That we weren't just talking about one of those aspects. That there's a reason to consider this as a preferable outcome for professional reasons for us as a skill, for reasons in society, and for businesses as well.
Yeah, sometimes you hear, well, business is just cutthroat. You got to just think about yourself, and you're kind of saying, well, empathy is needed in business then as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think people walk a line there between trying to say that it does your business bottom line good to have more empathy, and then the idea that having more empathy is sort of good for you anyway. But they're both true, so I guess the ends justify the means either way.
Well, I like to think that empathy is the means to the end of a culture of empathy.
Yeah.
So the ends are the means in that sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So it's like, why is it essential? That's like one of the headings there. You kind of start off. I mean, why should you have empathy in business?
Yeah. So in that section, I think what I was trying to communicate is the sense that if empathy evolved at sort of a tribal level with the number of people in your close relations, that we have continued to expand the circles of empathy, the in-groups that we feel connected to the level of, at the highest levels, it might be religion or political groups or nationalism. But the problems that we're able to create together as a society are much bigger than any one of those groups. They don't belong to one of those groups. So a simple example I remember from the Supreme Court, or federal court recently, was smog crossing state lines. So the Midwest pollution would cause East Coast acid rain and pollution and health issues and things like that. And in this case, they said that the EPA wasn't authorized to regulate that. So you might feel state pride, but there are issues that go beyond state lines and go beyond your in-groups. Or you could look at climate change or refugee crises or droughts. Any of those issues dealing with problems that are larger than the in-groups that we have, or cross those boundaries, since any given person is in many in-groups in their own mind. They cross those boundaries, and the idea of expanding the circle of people that you feel connected to and responsible for is a way to be able to address those problems, to feel that you have a stake in that, to recognize that somebody else's issue could just as easily be your own, and then hopefully to be able to take action as a result of that foundation of shared understanding.
Yeah, so it's really the idea is that in groups, people might have empathy within their little community, their family, or their society, or their religion, and we're needing to find ways of kind of getting beyond that and having like a wider sense of empathy, a broader sense of empathy.
Right, because
Yeah.
sometimes the opposite side of that in-group empathy is a feeling of disconnection from whoever's outside those boundaries. Of, if it was religion, then outside my religion, I have a harder time relating to, have a harder time prioritizing issues when they're put in that context. And I think the science is really interesting there to show that, for example, if you list a policy statement, a fictional policy statement on some issue, and then say it was from a Republican platform versus a Democratic platform, it totally changes the reader's impression of that policy, regardless of the content. If you don't say whether it was Republican or Democrat, then people will judge it on its merits. And if you just put that little tagline, then it changes your opinion. So that's part of my fascination, I think, with this, is that humans are so contextual based on all the cues around them and all the information and situational factors that they're in.
Yeah, so how do you overcome that? Because that's kind of what I'm looking at. Because it's for me, it's the culture of empathy, which is really like a widespread empathy. So everybody empathizing with everyone and kind of getting rid of those those in group and out group kind of way of being. So how do you get rid of that in out group way of thinking?
I think I read and I try to learn what other people are finding, and I kind of it's the science there. I'm kind of a science nerd. But some of the other guests might know a lot of proven tips and tricks, but I've tried to collect some of them. So in the paper, it lists some examples, and I think what's interesting to me is sometimes the answers are equally contextual and situational to the two people or groups that you're trying to bridge, and how they, the barriers that they perceive between each other now. So, for example, I was reading about power relationships can be something that makes empathy more difficult to have. So you can imagine on the scale of international politics, there's sort of the Israel and Palestine. In the workplace, there's a power relationship. And different things work to establish empathy between parties in a power relationship in general. So, for example, the person in power wants to feel that the weaker group is participating and contributing, that they're chipping in and pulling their weight. And the people who are not in power don't need to, understand the other person's perspective like you might normally think, or just spend time with them. They need to feel listened to, having their own words reflected back to them, synthesized and processed. Is a powerful way to establish some baseline, and then you can work from there to get more empathy. So I like finding all those little clues about how empathy works differently for different situations, and different things might work.
And then you're also looking how that kind of affects the design process. And I mean, that's kind of what your goal was, is like with a design firm, you're trying to see how you can make it a more efficient, more effective, more empathic process.
From a design company perspective, I think there's multiple reasons for us to look into it. So one is having the outcome in the world as a preferable outcome. If there's more empathy, being able to overcome more problems as a result. I think it's also a key skill as a design researcher, to be able, as you were saying, it's part of the name of the process in one curriculum, to be able to go out in the field, spend time with people in their homes, be a fly on the wall, and try to understand from their perspective what their needs are, what their life is like, what the opportunities are. So there's the outcome in the world, there's a deep understanding of users that enables you to make good designs. And then there's even the skill of being able to communicate that, what you've learned, to your clients and your peers. And empathy, I think, is key in all of those. So there's sort of the internal perspective for our practice and the outcome of our products themselves. So, for example, as a skill professionally, we're bringing this to a workshop at EPIC, which is ethnography, praxis, and industry, I think, where we're going to run a workshop to try to learn from professional ethnographers all the skills that they use to establish empathy with the people that they're studying. How can we use some of those principles to apply it to products? Or is there a gap there? Does it not work? But we're going to try to run a workshop where we learn from the people who do this professionally, establishing empathy, to see whether some of the same things that they do could be elements of product design that achieve an outcome in the world. So all of those things and their intersection is interesting to us.
Are you kind of the main person working on this aspect of empathy? Is there a team working on it, or are you kind of driving it?
I'm driving it a little bit. We're about 45 people in two cities, and there's the entire company is being encouraged to get involved in what it means to be in 21st century design. But let's see, 3 of my colleagues are going to be running that workshop. I won't be able to go, and we've all tried running this as a workshop as well internally. So in one of our company meetings, there's some examples of how to spot an opportunity for empathy and examples of what you might do in a product to establish more empathy. And we did that with our active projects, just to see if we tried to apply some of these lessons, what would it do? If you try to take some sort of random project, like one of them was in-flight entertainment that somebody was working on, is there potential there? Does it help you accomplish anything? And what we found is not only might there be an opportunity that you wouldn't have recognized for empathy among, say, the passengers or between the passengers and the crew in in-flight entertainment, but it's a different innovation lens, if you will. It's a sort of a way to come at a problem from way out of left field and maybe come up with something you wouldn't have come up with otherwise. So there's sort of innovation reasons to use this as well.
Well, I'm coming way out of left field here myself in terms of wanting to build a culture of empathy. It's like seeing how in the world culture we can actually transform the culture and the social systems, business, government, justice system, education, and how can we just create more empathy between all people in the world and the products, actually, so that products, when they're designed with empathy, it's like they embody the essence of that spirit, and it seems like to me. So it can be, you can tell a product when somebody's really thought of how it's going to affect you, put themselves in your shoes. So the part that I'm really interested in is also I'm looking for processes to create a culture of empathy. So I'm looking at this, the design school, or perhaps processes that you have to turn the process on how to foster empathy itself. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like I've seen some workshops with the design school where they say, well, here's this problem. It was like you mentioned in-flight entertainment. I think theirs was gift giving. But here the problem is we need more empathy, and what can we do to create more empathy using empathy to create it? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, because I'm really excited about that and really wanting to learn more about it. And that's why I got really excited when I saw your article and that you were, in the design field.
Mhm. So in our on the professional side, rather than the things you might embed in the product, but on the professional side, I think for us, nothing beats spending face-to-face time with the people that we're talking about. And the only reason not to do that is because you don't have the budget or resources or time, and so you need some intermediary thing. But from everything that I've read about the science and been trained with, you go out and you spend time with people. You shop where they shop, and we have techniques, anything from ride-alongs. We recently did with EMTs, so following them through the course of their day, asking them questions when there's breaks about how things work, being sort of a fly on the wall and just observing over a longer period of time to try to extract your own interpretations is a classic ethnographic technique. When we can't wait around for key events to happen, sometimes we'll stage them. So we'll give people like a scavenger hunt in order to see how well they can use their mobile phone for different reasons and what they fall back on, what their patterns are. I know that there's been lots of other examples written about sort of surrounding yourself with examples of what the user might have. So, creating a little space, like we have project rooms that we turn into sort of stuff plastered all over the wall, photos of the people that we've talked to, and photos of the objects that they've had, and things like that to just be embedded in their stuff. There's all sorts of I've seen examples of like the wearing the fat suits or wearing the physically restricting suits where you actually cannot do certain things as well, or your dexterity is reduced with gloves or that kind of thing. All of those are examples. I recently had one which I don't recommend, which is getting hit by a car and breaking a few bones and having a broken thumb and I couldn't do very many things on my own, but I also had the ambulance ride and sitting in the hospital on a backboard with a neck brace, looking up at the ceiling for 3.5 hours, I think, and we had another project team who was doing emergency medical response as a project, and so I spent some time debriefing them about what it was like and what I was thinking about, and what I was actually in the moment thinking, like, what is this like for me, and what could I tell them? A little overzealous, but you can do those kinds of follow-alongs or staged incidents where you track through a process. All of those are good ways, and that's just on the side of building initial empathy with the users. But there's all those other areas, like when you're trying to communicate with your client or to other project team members or other people about what you've now internalized. They haven't done that yet, so how can you spread that indirectly? So we've invested a lot of time talking about storytelling techniques. We use a lot of faces. We use a lot of video rather than just quotations. And all of these things where it gets closer to an in-person experience where you're using your own senses seem to be the most direct line to access our biological empathic capacity.
So you want to empathize with others. You want to really put yourself in a situation where you can feel their experience to the maximum. Then, like, get hit by by a car or whatever. And well, yeah. So I'm also looking at how do we foster empathy. So there's so many different relationships, right? We're talking about relationships within your company, the company to the clients, the company to the users, the clients to the users. So it's this whole web of relationships and how to kind of foster it. And if you look through all of society, there's this whole web of relationships. And I'm just looking at how do we increase all those relationships with empathy, so that people are learning more to be more empathic in general. So I think that these processes in the design processes, I think, can be used towards that, to those ends.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. We were looking at what we could do in our products as well, and I think that list is going to keep growing about not just a product that's well designed for the person it's going to end up with, but what if there were products that actually increased empathy between some of its users and other of its users. So things like, for example, people who bought this also bought this kinds of things. Recommendation systems are kind of like an echo chamber. So if you read more books about this polemic topic on one side, it's only going to recommend you additional books on that side of the topic. And so does that have an impact on your ability to empathize with the other side? Or using faces in products and using sensory information when connecting people who are normally different, who would perceive themselves first and foremost as different from each other, finding the common ground as a way to introduce them to each other, or as a way to make a connection, and then revealing the differences, are all things that we've talked about. And I think what we hope to come up with is more and more of those, where the product itself may create more empathy, and that's, for example, why we want to run that workshop, and we keep talking about it with clients. Every new project that we get to basically run that little workshop on and see how it applies gives us more practical information about, did it work for this? No. Why not? Did it work for that? Maybe there's some new principle there that we might try again.
Well, I would like to keep the conversation going if possible, because this is just, that you're working on empathy and we're working on it as well. And, these interviews, for example, I'm trying to empathize with the viewers, because I tend to I just enjoy the topic so much, I go on, and we had talked about trying to keep it under, 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So, so maybe we'll bring, unless there's something that you feel we should cover, but anyone can, go to this video and see the links down here, and there's links to your article. I'll put together a web page, with information about your article, about your design firm, about Artifact, and all the other materials, so people can kind of follow up there. So, is there any kind of final, important kind of aspect you think we should cover?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and I remember when I was starting to do the research for the paper and getting interested in it, I found your website at that point too. So it's a good resource of links off to many other things.
Okay, well then, great. Thanks for sharing your insights on this, and I look forward to maybe connecting in the future. Because I plan to kind of connect with all these other design firms too, to kind of learn more about that process. Is something that we can use in terms of building more empathy, cultural wide.
Yeah.
So this is my start. So this is great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you learn as you go forward with the culture of empathy too. I'm curious about the tension between the benefits that people feel that these in-groups provide to them, and being able to empathize with somebody outside that group. And wonder if you lose one or the other when you try to cross that boundary. The feeling of belonging to, say, a particular institution, with the ability to connect with another. I wonder whether you can have both effectively, where everybody is able to cross all those boundaries and empathize effectively.
Well, now with the election coming up, I want to do some panel discussions with conservatives and progressives, Democrats and Republicans, and actually have it be about empathy. It's like, here, what are your values, and how do those values relate to empathy, and have people share stories, and try to get away from the policies, which are so divisive, and bring it down to a values kind of discussion. And there's all kinds of techniques that can be used, for deepening that empathy. And one of them is like reflective listening, which you're probably using as well, where you create the dialogue so everybody's reflecting what they're hearing, before they move on to share their story, and see if we can kind of bridge exactly what you're talking about, bridge that political divide. So
yeah, that's a great place to start. It's a big, hairy issue. I've been watching both the conventions and hearing people talk about it. It's a tricky one to overcome, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that's the next 8 weeks up to the election. So, okay, well, Dave, I could go on forever. If you want to talk more, I'm up for it. But we said about 30 minutes. I don't want to, go over.
Yeah, I need to get back to some other things.
Okay, well, very good. Then I'll follow up later with email and whatnot. So nice talking to you, Dave.
Nice talking to you too. Thank you.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.